Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. As part of a comprehensive news analysis, today we'll be discussing 6 important articles out of the Hindu Newspaper Delhi edition. But before we begin, as always, do remember that a Telegram quiz will be ready as soon as this session is over, and you have to like, share and subscribe to the channel if you're finding it useful in your preparation generally. Now with this, good morning to everybody, and let's look at the 6 topics we have to cover. Quite interesting that ways. First is with the Prime Minister moving from the US to Cairo, which is Egypt. Now let's discuss the India-Egypt relationship. How is it faring? What are the challenges and opportunities in that relationship generally? Thereafter, we'll talk about the gender gap report which has come and how is India performing on that. Thereafter, the most important development which came out of the US visit itself, which is the engine, F414 engine, which has now been finalized and will be co-produced in India with General Electronics and Hull. And thereafter, we'll move to the issue related to G20 and their Global Social Security Declaration. Then we will talk about how capital expenditure of the states has become a little bit skewed. And last but not the least, we'll talk about how semiconductor chip assembly will start. If you remember, just recently we talked about semiconductor fabrication, but chip assembly is going to happen in India very soon. And by 2024, India will be producing basic semiconductor chips also. So, as I said, GS paper 2, GS paper 3, Prelims Bytes section, a little bit more factual than what we have to do in the first 3. With this, let's enter into our first most important article. As always, basic idea first, then we'll move into the nitty-gritty, and thereafter we'll summarize everything in the end. So let's talk about India-Egypt. See, India-Egypt relationship has been quite historical, is very old with regards to even since the Harappan civilization. We have basic connections between Harappa and the Egyptian civilization, be it Maurya, be it post-Maurya. Throughout history, Egypt has been on the map with regards to how India is connected to it. Muslin, indigo, cotton, a lot of different commodities were flowing between these two countries. And we have textual as well as inscriptional evidence from India and Egypt, both vis-a-vis trade and connections in that sense. So it's a historical relationship. Soft power automatically applies to it because of that old connection. However, with the Prime Minister moving to Cairo with the Egyptian summit or the Cairo summit, which is going to happen 24th and 25th today and tomorrow, there are a lot of questions which are in front of us. First is, what is the opportunity? What are the challenges? And what are the concerns? But in order to understand the challenges and opportunities and concerns itself, first we need to understand what is our relationship with Egypt as of right now as a trade partner. So though we have substantial amount of trade with Egypt, year on year there has been a 17% decline in the trade which is happening between India and Egypt generally. We are Egypt's 6th largest partner when it comes to trade, export-import. But Egypt is India's 38th, so therefore very insignificant in the larger story itself. And if we look at any form of Indian investment into Cairo or into Egypt itself, it's maximum $3 billion, which is not a very big amount. And Egypt itself has only invested $37 million into India, and not more than 2,000 to 3,000 students, maximum 5,000 students from India go to Egypt for their studies also. So when we talk about the basic relationship as of today, maybe historically it has been quite good, it has been quite flourishing. As of right now, the relationship is quite cold in the sense that there is no institutional mechanism or basic bilateral institution which can actually facilitate trade. And therein comes this article which talks about what is the opportunity for us and what is the challenge for us vis-a-vis how Egypt is as of right now. So when we talk about the basic indicators, it is not very overwhelming. It is not very exciting in that regard. However, Egypt is an opportunity for India vis-a-vis investment, vis-a-vis how India can put a lot of its basic soft power based influence, and generally Egypt can become with the Suez Canal under its control, we can push in a lot of investment. And they need things which we already export. For example, they are the biggest importer of refined petroleum, and we are very good at getting crude oil and then refining it. They also are the biggest exporter of wheat. In that context, India's relationship with Egypt becomes important because wheat import into Egypt is quite big, and therefore India can export wheat to Egypt. Thereafter, there's another aspect related to it, where is pharma. So pharmaceutical companies, again, there's a lot of potentiality for India to push into the pharma sector of Egypt, and there's a lot of money which is involved and can be pushed into Egypt vis-a-vis that. So first is that the trade is not very overwhelming because of the institutional mechanisms not being there. Though India has a high commission there, there is a good relationship, historical relationship, but it has not translated into too much. 17% decline year on year, 6th, 38th, not a big numbers in that regard, but the opportunity is in export. Opportunity is in export, cars, wheat, pharma, and refined petroleum being the most important imports which India can push into the Egyptian sector. Now, what is the challenge? Again, I'm giving you the basic overview. The challenge is basically how Egypt's economy is as of right now. Since the Russia-Ukraine crisis, there has been a major inflationary trend. It is struggling with its forex. It is also struggling with its internal deficit, which is close to 43% of its GDP. It is stagnated economy. And more than that, there's not a lot of scope for India to push in infrastructural development because they don't have money itself. So there are two basic aspects which this article is pointing out. First aspect is opportunities. The opportunities are quite a lot. They have a new Cairo project in which they're developing a new capital itself. You have a nuclear power plant which they want, high-speed rail network. All of these are opportunities in which India can push in. But the problem is, even if they're developing new Cairo, even if they're developing railways, even if they're developing the basic concept of a nuclear power plant, they don't have money to pay. So what this article basically is pointing out is that we don't need to do the same mistakes which we did in Iraq and Iran, which is that we have to make sure that we tend to invest or push into their sectors which can give us immediate return. And we should not go into long-term infrastructural projects in which we will not get a return, or the Indian taxpayer is going to pay for that project in Egypt itself. So basically, there are four basic contours of this article. First is the basic point of opportunities, challenges, opportunities being the fact that we can push into the Egyptian sector with refined petroleum, with pharmaceuticals, with wheat, with cars. On the other aspect, we have the challenges, which is their stagnant economy, very high trade deficit. Along with that, their Exim Bank is more or less failing. They do not have the capacity to pay for big infrastructural projects. And therefore, with the Prime Minister there for the next 2 days, we need to be very strategic in the way we invest into Egypt. And that is the basic aspect of this article. Because with him going to Cairo, it will become important that we understand the India-Egypt relationship better. So I hope that we understand the basic contours here. Not a lot of details, but the basic contours are clear. We are not a very big trade partner of Egypt. They are not a very big trade partner for us. Over and above that, opportunities are there, challenges are there, and we have to be very cautious. So let's go into the nitty-gritty. We know that India and Egypt has a very long relationship, a very good relationship of trade since the, you can say, 3rd millennium BCE itself. And from indigo to muslin cloth to a lot of different commodities have been found. So, old historical relationship, soft power is there. This is called soft power, which is culture and historical power, or the aspect of how India can influence through culture. Now, when we talk about the basic numbers in the relationship, the numbers are not overwhelming. The trade with the most populous Arab country stood at close to 6,000 million, and that is 17% lower than what we did in the previous year. Over and above that, India is the 6th largest partner for Egypt, but Egypt is India's 38th largest partner. Thereafter, there are close to 50 different projects in which India has invested, but not a lot of money has been pushed because as it is, the economy is not in a very good situation. Further, Egypt has not invested quite a lot in India itself, and we don't expect that also. close to only 5,000, less than 5,000 Indian students are in Egypt as of right now. So therefore the diasporic population is also quite low. And the reason for this is basically lack of bilateral institutions and sense of purpose. Nobody knows what are we doing in Egypt. That is the basic point. Though it's a very important country vis-a-vis the connection between the Mediterranean and the Arabian Sea through the Suez Canal, that's a separate issue altogether. But generally, we have no real purpose in this country. Now, how does Egypt act as an opportunity for us? It acts as an opportunity very simply because of the fact that it is a very big country, so there is a lot of market for Indian goods. It's a very good economy as of right now, prima facie. But if you go into the details, it becomes a little bit problematic. Over and above that, Indian movies, Indian cinema is quite popular in Egypt. Therefore, there's a different type of cultural understanding vis-a-vis cinema and music, and even basic, very important actors, old movies, even the new movies are released in Egypt quite a lot. So there's a cultural connection in that sense. But the most important opportunity which is introduced to India, or is the most important way in which we can actually harness the potentiality of Egypt, is through refined petroleum exports to them, which is imports into Egypt. Wheat, because it is the world's largest importer of wheat itself. Then cars, corn, and pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals, refined petroleum, and wheat are three very important supplies which India can be a part of. So therefore, India can export these three commodities, and India already has a very robust mechanism of pushing these things into Egypt itself. Thereafter, the Egyptian government has also three very major projects. First, New Cairo, thereafter a nuclear power plant, and a high-speed rail network. But as you will see, the problem is that these are things for which they don't have money. The IMF has also lended quite a lot to Egypt, but still they're struggling generally. So therefore, Egypt was the world's third largest arms importer also. So India can send Akash, even LCA. The simple point of the matter is India has different zones in which it can actually push into and harness the potentialities of Egypt. However, the challenges are much bigger and much problematic. The challenges is that the economy is static, pandemic mostly ruined it, global slowdown is impacting it quite a lot. The Russia-Ukraine conflict has also impacted it because of inflation. Close to 30% annual inflation as of right now. Currency has lost half of its value since February. The foreign exchange is quite low, and as of right now, the foreign debt is 43% of the GDP, and foreign assets are actually in minus $24 billion. So therefore, if you look at it, Egyptians don't have money. And therefore, the simple point which this article is trying to make is the fact that India needs to manage its relationship with Egypt in such a way that we push into Exim line of credit, barter or rupee trading. But we should not do the same mistake which we did in 1980s and 90s vis-a-vis going into hard-earned construction projects in which they don't have money, and in the end, Indian taxpayer pays for that basic project itself. So let's try to contextualize what we've done. There's a lot of data which has been given. Data generally is not important for a UPSC aspirant. What is more important is trends. First and foremost point, very simply, is that the relationship is underwhelming. 17% decline, 6th, 38th, over that not more than $3 billion has been pushed into Egypt. So the relationship is not very overwhelming. Over and above that, there are 4 areas in which we can contribute and there is opportunity. There are 4 red flags, and therefore the conclusion is important. The 4 areas in which we can push is pharma, you have the basic petroleum products, the simple concept of wheat, and we have an opportunity in investment in infrastructure. However, while these 3 are good, the red flag comes here because if you look at the problems, they are much bigger. And the problem is that very simply, they do not have basic, what we call as fiscal prudence is not there. The debt is quite high. Further, inflation is also high. The currency is losing its value. And over and above that, they are not very, very strong vis-a-vis paying back to these investments. And therefore, the conclusion, and this is what you remember, please understand this. This is what you remember, is that we need to be cautious. And second is that as much as we are cautious, we need to manage our relationship. In the sense, once we manage our relationship in such a way that we only push into areas in which there is short-term gain, thereafter it will become okay to not push into long-term gains. The simple point is long-term gains would be in infrastructure, but there's no point going into it because of the fact that infra projects are going to not give you a lot because the economy is stagnant. On the other hand, short-term gains could be line of credit itself. We can be a very important lender to Egypt. Over and above that, we can also make sure that we can push a lot of these things into a very big economy and a very big, what we call as a very populous country in the Arab sector in North Africa itself. So this is the basic point which this article is making. I hope the 5 or 6 basic points are clear. Yes? Which is opportunity, risks, how do we manage it? Yes? Great. Perfect. Now, we can move on to the second article, which talks about the annual gender gap report. And though India has climbed 8 positions in that, we are still 127th out of 146 countries. And if you look at the indicators, you will realize that India does well in certain and India is doing really badly in the other ones. So when you go for a gender gap report, what are the basic 4 indicators? This is very important for prelims examination itself. The gender parity index or the gender gap report, it takes 4 basic things into consideration. The first is economic participation and opportunity of women. So gender means how is the parity or the equality between men and women. And therefore, economic participation and opportunity to women, educational attainment of women, health and survival of women, and political empowerment of women. So vis-a-vis men and women, if in this report your percentage is very high, it means that the gap is low. So if it says that there is 92% parity, means that there's only 8% disparity. Now, the problem in India is that on certain indicators we're doing quite well. For example, political empowerment, we're doing well. And on the other hand, we are doing well in educational attainment a little bit. But when it comes to health and survival and economic participation, it is not that good. And therein lies the way we need to bring everything together quickly. Now, when we talk about the global gender gap, taking all countries into consideration, it is at 68.4%, which means that close to 30%, 32% disparity is there. And if you go with the basic indicators as of right now, there's a modest improvement of 0.3%, but it will take close to a century, 131 years to actually bring this gap down, which is problematic. Because we want gender parity by 2030. But this is saying that we can't have it before 2131. And therefore, the gender parity across the board is problematic except for the Nordic countries, which is quite standard, which is that Iceland holds the first position with gender equality vis-a-vis 91% gender parity. And it is the only country which actually has touched 90%. Other countries such as Norway, Finland and Sweden, again the upper 80s. But India's performance in most of these indicators are not above 40-45%. Now, when we talk about the indicators in which India is doing well, it is first political empowerment. And political empowerment is because of the fact that we have the Panchayati Raj institutions and the municipal corporations which have a certain number of seats which are reserved for women itself. And because of the 73rd and 74th Amendment itself, which is the Panchayati Raj institutions and municipal corporations, we are doing quite well vis-a-vis local governance and women's representation. But if you look at the data related to the parliament, Indian parliament, it is only 15% of women as part of the total number of MPs in the parliament itself. And therefore, there's a new push, and this should renew our basic urge to push in for the Women's Reservation Bill, which can reserve 33% of all seats in the Lok Sabha and state assemblies for women, which was proposed in 1996 itself. But since then, it has been put on the back burner. But the aspect of political participation in India is still good. There are multiple countries in which these indicators are very bad. In India, still because of the Panchayati Raj institutions and generally the municipal corporations, we do well. We do well. But again, the indicator is not that above 40, 45, 50. Maximum 50% is reaching. We are doing well in education also. Not that good vis-a-vis the Nordic countries, but we still do well. But the problem is not where do we do well. It's rather where the problem lies. And the problem is in two very dangerous indicators. And the two basic dangerous indicators are economic opportunity to women and health and survival. So though we have improved the sex ratio at birth, the aspect here is it's a vicious cycle we are caught into. The cycle is very simple. Because we are not giving proper vocational or education at the lowest level, that leads to early marriage, and thereafter, because there is early marriage, there is lack of economic opportunity, and with lack of economic opportunity, she gets more and more tied up with the household itself, and that in turn can lead to health issues because of early pregnancy and other issues itself, and there is no understanding of how to make sure that nutrition and other basic indicators of the child or the mother are also in the right way. And this in turn contributes into the larger cycle, which is education is where we need to invest into so that early marriages can be stopped, which can in turn give more opportunity to women, and that can also improve our health indicators. Please understand this. This vicious cycle is not just for this article. It's generally important for your preparation because this can be used in the social issues paper. So education, be it vocational, be it technical, the aspect is that because we are not giving them education which can give them a job, the problem is with no jobs, they are going for early marriages. With early marriages, they are not having economic opportunities. With not having economic opportunities or even basic understanding of nutrition, there's health issues for the child and the woman itself. And thereafter, this translates into a vicious cycle because now the girl child will also be exposed to the same issues itself. So the problem is in the way we have created a cycle which is problematic. As it is, the number of women at very high positions and technical jobs is going down. And we have created a regime in which patriarchy works in such a way that certain jobs are only seen for men and certain jobs are seen for women. And vis-a-vis the household work itself, in which a lot of energy in which they are putting into, that does not lead a lot or does not have or does not give you a lot of room for paid work itself. So though being a house manager or housewife is quite important in Indian society itself, the aspect is that it in itself is a major economic impediment or problematic aspect of the Indian economy itself. Women need to be part of the economy. Women should be part of the economy, and women need to be empowered to be part of the economy. And in that, we need to somewhere intervene in this cycle. If we do not intervene anywhere in this cycle, we are making sure that patriarchy perpetuates this basic cycle itself. And that is the problem here. The more we do not intervene into this cycle, either through education, either through health, the more it gets perpetuated. And therefore, we need to make sure that we break the cycle somehow so as to bring in gender parity in India itself. So the aspect here is that access for men and women economic opportunity is one of the worst, with less than 40% parity itself. There is an uptick in wages and income, but the number of women in senior positions and technical jobs are low. Further, India's performance on health and survival is also dismal. Though we have improved the sex ratio at birth, very slow rate of progress itself. Access to education through schools and colleges needs to go up, and more than that, paid work. Paid work is very, very important. And therefore, women end up doing unpaid work at home, and therefore they do not have the energy or time to push it into paid work itself. And the most important way we can change this cycle, how we break this cycle, is by giving them education which assures a job to them. Job assured education, be it vocational, be it technical. The aspect is, if we do that, it will automatically improve nutrition. It will automatically break the vicious cycle of what is called early marriages, leading to poor maternal and child health itself. Though the pandemic was a major blow to women, and it created a lot of burden on them and very differentially impacted men and women both, we need to make sure that this gap is very quickly covered. Now, before I repeat everything what I've done, do you understand the basic point of this article? Because it's talking about where India is doing well, it is talking about where India is not doing well. And it's talking about a vicious cycle which you need to understand, because that will help you in understanding social issues and patriarchy in India well. So let me just basically repeat the basic point. As I always do, I'm trying to give you the simplest topic in the simplest way possible. Simple point. The concept of men and women having parity is quite important. Gender gap report studies that, and it gives a percentage of equality. The higher the percentage, the better it is. Nordic countries 90-80%. India, though, has improved 8 ranks itself. The aspect is that it is still 127th. And we are not reaching in most of the indicators above 50% also. What are the indicators in which we are good? Because of the 73rd and 74th Amendment, we are good in local governance and women, but when it comes to the parliament itself, only 15% representation. Education also, access is good, but the outcomes are not good. The cycle which is extremely important for you to understand is that if the lack of education is there, or education is there which does not give opportunity to women, it in turn leads to early marriages, which is quite common in India. And thereafter, early marriages itself will translate into lack of economic opportunity, in which again India is not very good. And thereafter, it leads to health issues, because with no proper education or no economic opportunity, and with only a single person earning for the family, there can be nutritional issues for women and the child itself. And this will again translate into educational issues, because the income is low and the women do not understand the importance of education itself, because they are part of the same process itself. This is how patriarchy is basically internalized, and this creates a cycle which India needs to break somehow. And if we don't break it, we are still going to make sure that 40-45% is going to be a gender parity, which is quite dismal. Very, very bad that ways, and we need to improve it at the earliest. So this is an alarming article as much as it is giving you certain information. So I hope that you understand the basic point and you understand the vicious cycle, because the vicious cycle is important for understanding of UPSC and generally social issues and patriarchy when it comes to your syllabus itself. Clear? Very good. Okay. Now, we've moved to the third major article, which is the technology transfer of jet engines to Hull, Hindustan Aeronautical Limited, and it will be given by the General Electric. We had a discussion of this, if you remember, previously also under Prelims Bytes, in which we were talking about how General Electric can give us certain technologies for jet engines for Hindustan Aeronautical Limited or Hull itself. Now, what is the potentiality and why is this engine so important? We'll talk about the nitty-gritty, we'll talk about the smaller details later. We first need to understand that yes, in the next 3 years, we'll get the first jet engine which will be jointly produced. Yes, 80% of the technology will be transferred to Hull, which is quite important. But why is this engine so important? This engine is quite important for 2 very simple reasons. See, the F414 jet engine is an important engine because it is used in 3 to 4 very important aircrafts. And now the memorandum of agreement has gone to the Congress, which is the American Congress itself. It will be notified. Then India, the cabinet is going to ratify it. Thereafter, the basic agreement is going to be there. It is seen as groundbreaking. But see, This is the F414 jet engine, and when we talk about this engine, it's quite complex. The most important aspect here is that the LCA, which is produced by us indigenously, still uses an engine which is not Indian. So the LCA, the Light Combat Aircraft, which is groundbreaking for India, for its defense and its air force itself, there are different aspects which we produce in India, but the jet engine mostly comes out of either Boeing or comes out of Hull vis-a-vis buying it from someone else. Either it is Russian or it is American. Now the point is that we do not have the capacity to develop a lot of critical technologies which can change everything. So when we talk about, for example, the ceramic matrix composite seals, these are seals which are applied so that at high speed it does not break through. For example, when it comes to the turbine itself, when it comes to the nozzle, afterburner nozzles from which the thrust comes out, in this we do not have the right understanding of coating, of fabrication, or how do we use the titanium and how can we make it efficient. And without technology transfer, it will take us multiple years to actually understand this basic concept itself. And with 80% of the technology being transferred to India, this engine can be a major breakthrough for India itself, because now if after a certain point of time US is ready or the American Congress is ready to give India the F-18 Hornet or even the EA-18 Growler, or we take it from the Swedish, which is the Saab Gripen itself, and our Tejas Mark II, which is the second version which is coming through, and even if we want to take it from South Korea, which is Kai KF-21, all of these 5 different fighters have one thing in common, which is all of them have the same engine, which is the F414 engine. And therefore, when it comes to the LCA Mark II, when it comes to any of these fighters, we will have the capacity to either build it or repair it. See, getting an engine is easy, but repairing an engine is very, very difficult. So the maintenance is something which will for multiple years cost the public exchequer, you and me. And therefore, if Hull, Hindustan Aeronautical Limited, can actually understand these engines better, we will be able to develop it, but also repair it and maintain it better. So why is this engine in so much focus is because the F-18 Hornet and the Growler both are quite important fighters which were used by the US in Afghanistan. And therefore they are made for what are called very, very heated conditions. And as it is, Tejas, the LCA needs a second generation engine. And if we use 2 of them, we will get a twin nozzled engine or a twin, what we call twin engined fighter, for example, the Sukhoi. So it allows us to move away from Russian ware also. For example, Sukhoi and the MiGs we can move away from. And as it is, MiGs are failing quite a lot. And we can move towards an American understanding. But as of right now, when we have India-Russia relationship, the biggest problem in that is Russia has never technology transferred or given us the technology of making that engine itself. This is very groundbreaking because America is ready to give us the technology to make that engine. And if we talk about what are they ready to give us, you don't have to learn this, but in all these areas, India will have a better understanding and even joint development, which will allow for our capability to make the Tejas Mark II better and at a cheaper cost and maintain it better also. And we can thereafter also export these engines to other people or other countries itself. So they are giving us, for example, how does the special coating is there for corrosion. There's a lot of heat which is being produced, a lot of oxygen is there, corrosion can be there. They will tell us how that coating is pushed so that the corrosion goes down. Turbine blades, again coating. Further, the discs which are there in the turbine, they are the most standard things which start to wear and also have to be very, very powerful and strong so that they can withstand all the pressure which is there. Further, polymer matrix composite, ceramic matrix composite for the flaps, laser drilling technology, all of these things will be transferred to us. You don't learn this, but you understand the implication of this. The implication is that these technologies have not been available to India for a very long time. This can be a breakthrough for Indian aerospace and basic defense technologies. So, very simply, before we move on to the Prelims Bytes section, let's try to understand what these three articles have basically tried to talk about and why are they important for your preparation. Till this point, everybody's with me? No basic problems? Yes? Okay, perfect. So, the first article discussed the relationship between India and Egypt, and because the Prime Minister is in Egypt right now, we need to understand where do we take that relationship, how do we take that relationship. Very simply, the first aspect here is very simple, that India-Egypt relationship is not overwhelming as of right now. Lot of places for what we call as intersection and opportunities, which is pharmaceutical, wheat, and the petroleum refined products itself. Thereafter, the problem is Egypt is not a very strong economy. It does not have the capacity to give us long-term gains. So we need to make sure that our relationship is cautious and also make sure that we are only investing into things which give us short-term gains first. Second, the second article was about the gender parity index and the gender gap report itself. And the aspect here is again, India is not that very, we can't say that it's performing really bad, but it's okay-ish when it comes to its performance. The two indicators on which India is okay is basically political participation and education. But on all other indicators, when it comes to economic opportunity and health and survival, there is a lot of concern which the report has pushed into, and we should be concerned about these indicators equally. It's talked about a vicious cycle, and I hope you understood how education translates into problematic health indicators and lack of economic opportunities. The third article is about a major breakthrough in India-US relationship, which is getting technology transfer vis-a-vis F414 engines, and this is very important because 5 major fighters, 1 Swedish, 2 American, and 1 South Korean, and 1 Indian itself. All of these have the same basic concept, which is that they have the same engine itself. We can maintain it better, we can develop it better, and we will now also have the capacity to develop our own engine. We have not been able to develop anything in India because we don't have understanding of this, and therefore technology transfer is a very important word. If all of this is clear, then we move on to the Prelims Bytes section, smaller articles, straightforward. I'll tell you what to remember there. Yes? Perfect. Great. So let's talk about the first thing, which is the G20 Trade Unions Summit, which recently happened. And our Union Minister for Labour and Employment, he took part into it. And there are 2 statements and 1 declaration which is very important for you. The first thing which it said was that there needs to be, and this is a basic emphasis of the G20 as of right now, called the L20, Labour 20 in that regard. First is, and you need to understand these words, the union said that there needs to be universalization of social security and portability of social security funds. This is a very important point, wherein it says that because people change their jobs quite a lot, social security funds and social security should be portable and universal. Therefore, even if I want to change jobs, it should not be a hassle to, for example, take my EPFO account with me. It is not very, very problematic in India. It is quite portable that way, but we are an example for the world where we can make social security something which is universal and portable. These are 2 very important words, and now you need to take care of. Thereafter, it also says that we need to empower women in the future of work and upskilling of women in what is called technology intensive environments to make sure that the social dialogue which is happening is truly complete. Which means, again, empowering women into the labor sector, into the workforce, into economic sphere is extremely important for any country or for the whole of humanity to go forward. Last but not the least, it says social security systems should be inclusive, adaptable, and accessible. Again, three very important words which you can use in your mains or your prelims examination, wherein you can see these words sprinkled around. Inclusive means everybody should be a part of it. Adaptable means that it should change with time, and should be accessible, meaning that it should be accessible to informal labor also. The problem in India is that because social security is only available to formalized labor, which is not more than even 4 to 5% of the workforce itself, 96% of all workforce in India, as per the recent labor report, is informalized. Informalized means that either they're contractual or they do not have any social security. And the way we define formal itself is when they're within the safety net itself. And there is no safety net for construction workers, for brick workers, for basic what we call as hawkers, we have rickshawalas, we have the basic street vendors. A lot of our workforce has no basic social security. EPFO accounts, even PPF accounts, be it the national pension scheme, all of this is only available to formalized employees. And therefore, we need to make sure it is accessible to everyone. And that is quite dangerous. And informalization, informal economy, informal labor, as of right now, is one of the biggest issues which everybody faces. Everybody faces. Formal sector is when you have a proper institutions, more than 20 employees itself. There's a proper salaried person. He has a social security account. He has certain safeguards. He has certain notice periods. Informal sector means what we call as dihadi ka mazdoor, in the sense day-to-day work. If you get day-to-day work, there is no social security. You get work today, you don't get work tomorrow. So day-to-day work is, or contractual work is, what is called contractualization is nothing but informalization. And being a labor historian myself, the simple point is that since the British period, since colonial India itself, there's a push towards informalization. And you will see that jobs which were previously formal have become informal, in the sense that proper informalization of what we call as the workers who maintain basic cities. We have informalization in the dairy sector, we have informalization in the agricultural sector. As it is, most of the jobs which are available today, even in corporates, are contractual. Therefore, most of them are actually not giving you social security. So social security should be accessible, but should be accessible to the informal sector more. And the G20 is identifying that. The ILO also identifies this, that informalization is a major dangerous trend in the world as of right now. And therefore, we need to create safeguards so that we don't do it. Thereafter, the next is a very interesting piece on how capital expenditure is happening by states. So what do you mean by revenue and capital expenditure? Revenue expenditure is basically what we call as cash burning. You are just giving repetitive, what we call as money, to areas which does not create asset. They are non-asset producing expenditure. That's what's called revenue expenditure. Capital expenditure is asset producing expenditure, wherein you are developing certain roads, hospitals, certain amount of investment which can create an asset itself. So you have revenue expenditure, you have capital expenditure. What this article is talking about is that most of the states have missed their capex, which is capital expenditure targets itself. So though the center is doing it, the states are not doing it. So the two biggest, UP and Maharashtra, have actually lowered their capital expenditure, which has brought down everything with it, or the basic national average has also come down, because UP and Maharashtra have reduced their capital expenditure. So the article the report which has told us is the Bank of Baroda report of 25 states itself. And it argues that though the center is meeting its infrastructural spending or the capex or the capital expenditure itself, the problem is that the states are not doing that. And out of the 25 states which are under consideration, the maximum, the average is 76% of the total money allocated for capital expenditure was used. So out of the 5 lakh crore which was given to the states for capital expenditure, only 7 lakh crore which was given, only 5 lakh crore was used. And this is a major dangerous trend, because major states are bringing their capital expenditure down. With capital expenditure down, health indicators will take a hit, education indicators will take a hit, and generally a lot of indicators which generally are extremely important for human development will go down. And therefore, while center is meeting it, states are pushing it down. And it also gives you state by state coverage. So UP and Maharashtra, 2 lakh crore outlay was there. They've only used 29% of, meaning you have 29% of all the capex is with the UP and Maharashtra sector, and they have brought down the average because they've only achieved 70% of it. So out of the 100% outlay, 29.2% is with these two states only, which is UP and Maharashtra. And over and above that, because they only spent 70% of that, they brought the national average down itself. And the worst performing are Andhra Pradesh, which just used 23% of the CAPEX target, with Tripura, Nagaland and Haryana spending less than 50%. Now, you would say that why spend more? Revenue expenditure needs to go down. Capital expenditure needs to go up. Because capital expenditure is good for the nation and for the people itself. Therefore, the problem is that Tripura, Nagaland, Haryana are spending less than 50%, and Andhra Pradesh only spent 23% of its capital expenditure out of this 100% allocated. And therefore, with UP and Maharashtra also spending less than 70%, the whole national average came down. Further, only 4 states, Karnataka, Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh and Bihar, met or exceeded the target, and Jharkhand and MP used 98% of the target itself. 11 states crossed the 80% threshold, including Tamil Nadu and Gujarat. Now, what I mean by this is very simple. The simple point is that the way we are spending our money, or the states are spending their money, is they're increasing their revenue expenditure and they're bringing down their capital expenditure, which is very dangerous trend. And therefore, India needs to do something about this, and specifically the center, even the Finance Commission has to push the states to go for more capital expenditure. Out of the 7 lakh crore which was allocated, we have only used 5 lakh crore. And this is not a good thing because they would be spending that other 2 lakh crore in revenue expenditure. So when we talk about it, CAPEX or capital expenditure is the bedrock of a nation's development and the bedrock of the economy itself. And the state spending as of right now is very, very important, generally with consumption going down and inflation high. So very simply, what does this article talk about? It talks about 2 very simple things. Capital expenditure is going down, states are not spending, and certain states which should be spending are not spending, because UP and Maharashtra, very important when it comes to the total indicators, 30% of all allocation to these 2 states itself. Therefore, they need to change their trend, and this is a concerning aspect of the news which we saw in the paper itself. Last but not the least, and after this I'll give you the summary of whatever we've done today, is semiconductor, not fabrication, assembly and testing plant will be set up in India. So Micron, which is an American company, and this was announced just yesterday, is going to set up the first chip, not manufacturing, assembly and testing plant in India. And the next 6 quarters by 2024, it will be able to produce and start to export chips out of India. So it will create 5,000 direct and 15,000 indirect jobs itself. And semiconductors is foundational technology, we already know that. The simple aspect is very straightforward. The semiconductor ecosystem in India needs to be in fabrication. However, this is important because at least it will allow India to become an assembly and testing plant, which will allow certain amount of technology coming to India itself. There will be Japanese, what we call as collaboration also into this, because the Japanese are going to be making the chips and the manufacturing will happen in India. So the chip basic thing will come from Japan, assembly and testing will happen in India. So we are doing it for domestic market and for global market. Simple point is, it is assembly and testing. This is the easiest, not the what we call as the foundation of semiconductors, but at least it is something in that regard. So before I go to the mains question, let me give you a basic summary of what we've done till this point. We've done 3 topics in depth, 3 topics related to prelims. First topic was related to how India-Egypt relationship needs to go in a certain direction. Cautious one, we need to manage it in the right sense. Second was related to how the gender gap in India is not very good, close, not even touching 50%. We've not achieved 50% parity also. And the vicious cycle of education, health and economic opportunity is holding India down. Thereafter, we move to the F414 engines, which are extremely important. Technology will be transferred. 5 major aircrafts use that engine, so it will be a major boost to the Indian defense and aerospace sector. Thereafter, we move to the 3 smaller topics. One, straightforward related to chip manufacturing, as we saw, but it is not manufacturing but assembly and testing. Japanese will be involved, and Micron is going to set up a plant in India. By 2024, we will be catering to the domestic and to the export market itself. We also try to understand how capital expenditure in the states are not up to mark, in the sense that certain states which should be spending more are not spending at the level they should be. And the concerning aspect is 4 states are actually spending less than 50% allocated to them. And this is the problematic aspect of that story. And last but not the least, we tried to understand the 2 declarations, which is universal portability and accessibility to social security in the formal sector, but equally to be pushed for the informal sector. If all of this is clear, then we can look at the mains question. Can we do that? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. So the 2 questions for your practice: discuss the opportunities and challenges in India-Egypt bilateral relationship. Very straightforward question, GS paper 2. And India has a long way to go on certain indicators according to the gender gap report. Comment. Now this is again GS paper, both can be in 2 or 3, but this is a more important question because it is giving you certain indicators. You need to know which are the indicators on which we need to perform well. So with this, I would like to end the session. I hope all of these 6 articles made sense. We'll be back with another CNA tomorrow. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.